I am again thankful to all news media outlets for letting me use their contents. I greatly appreciate that. I am available 24/7 if they need any assistance. Now go to the headlines. Hi and very warm welcome at Amir Shackle 5858. I am Amir Shackle. Following news headlines have been reported by world major English news channels and news agencies. So please watch.
Tonight, breaking news. States of emergency as hundreds flee ahead of out-of-control wildfires on the East Coast. The massive new job cuts by RFK Jr. and America's health agencies. And King Charles sent to the hospital, what the palace is saying tonight. First new evacuations as dry conditions help fuel raging fires. One blaze in the Carolinas, now the highest priority fire in the U.S. as firefighters from as far away as Oregon rush in to help using bulldozers and chainsaws to make containment lines. Some residents watching helplessly as their homes are threatened. Faith Abube from the fire zone. HHS Secretary Robert Kennedy Jr. promising to slash 10,000 more jobs from the nation's health agencies, on top of the 10,000 already lost through buyouts and previous cuts. How this could impact the country's health system. Rachel Scott reporting. The White House acknowledging a mistake was made in the leaked Signal group chat with top national security officials. The fallout growing amid bipartisan calls for an investigation. The death toll rising in a horrific tourist submarine accident. Children among those killed. The desperate rescue operation. The news just coming in. King Charles sent to the hospital. What we're learning tonight. Vice President Vance facing a chilly reception in Greenland after President Trump vowed to go as far as we have to go to take over the world's largest island. Masked federal agents in plain clothes detain a Tufts University PhD student outside her home. The student's visa now terminated, and the administration's threat about more arrests. The first court appearance for a doctor accused of trying to kill his wife in Hawaii by pushing her off a cliff, and what authorities say he attempted next. An arrest in a Molotov cocktail attack on a Tesla dealership, what we're learning about the suspect. And America strong tonight across the country. It's time to play ball.
From ABC News World Headquarters.
Welcome back to this special edition of Hannity. We move on to this. Violent criminal illegal aliens finally facing justice for the first time in years. And few people know that better than Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin, who witnessed 3 years of President Biden's complete inaction. Well, there's a new sheriff in town, President Trump. And today, Youngkin was instrumental in assisting the successful law enforcement operation against MS-13. Also with Trump's backing, Youngkin is eliminating DEI at public universities around the Commonwealth, and he's appointing boards of visitors to make sure that the school stays on track for years to come, long beyond the one term he can stay in office as Virginia governor. Now, he's also earned a pretty interesting nickname, Vito Corleone, because he just vetoed over 150 bills that far leftists passed through the Democrat-controlled Senate and legislature. As many users on X like to say, quote, "This is the way." Joining us now with more, Governor Glenn Youngkin. Governor Youngkin, let's start with that operation today. There's this interagency task force. It's the first of its kind, the FBI, the DOJ, you as governor of Virginia. And I want to put up the results, just a few weeks of this task force that you've been working with. And here are the results just in your state. 28 MS-13 members arrested, 19 TDA, 27 TOC, that's transorganized crime, and 7 other gang members. Just in a few weeks, you have done this. You were sworn in January 15th, 2022. You had 3 years under President Joe Biden's leadership. Now that's switched, and in 2 months you've accomplished this. What's the difference between working with Biden for 3 years and Trump for 2 months?
Well, Kaylee, you said it perfectly. For 3 years, I've been declaring that Virginia is not a sanctuary state.
Tariff turmoil this Thursday night.
We are masters in our own home.
The Prime Minister's vow to protect Canadian workers and his message to the U.S. President.
We will build a new Canadian economy.
busted, where Canada's most wanted fugitive has been arrested. Dozens dead, hundreds falling ill. The new timeline to solve a medical mystery in New Brunswick.
This investigation is certainly different than the first one.
Why families are cynical. Plus, he's only 14 and stands more than 7 feet tall.
That's nice.
The high hopes for this Quebec boy's future in basketball.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us.
From CBS News headquarters in New York, this is the CBS Evening News.
Good evening, I'm Maurice Dubois. John Dickerson is off tonight. We begin here with high anxiety. Most Americans believe they are losing the battle against inflation. In a new CBS News poll, only 24% told us their incomes are keeping up with rising prices. 76% said they are not. And optimism about the future is falling. Last month, a third of Americans said they expect the economy next year to be booming. Since then, that number has fallen 5 points, and the number of Americans who believe we will be in a recession next year is up 5 points to 28%. Skylar Henry is in rural Georgia tonight, where, like many other parts of the country, people are struggling to make ends meet. Skylar?
And Maurice, we are in Butts County, Georgia, where the median income is a little more than $59,000 as it relates to household income. After speaking with some of the folks here today, one thing is for certain. Everyone is concerned about where their money is going these days. In Jackson, Georgia, a small town an hour south of Atlanta, diners at Fresh Air Barbecue, a family-owned restaurant nearly a century old, can feast on a chopped pork sandwich for only $4. Would you like a drink? Yes. A bargain for customers like Barbara Hall, who is living on a fixed income and watching every dollar.
You cut down on groceries. I go to the ads each week and see what's on sale each place. Sometimes I may go to 3 different grocery stores just to get stuff that's on sale.
And we've seen the headlines, the eggs.
Oh yeah, I hadn't bought any eggs.
A new CBS News poll finds the biggest economic concern among Americans who feel they're not doing well. CBS News poll finds the biggest economic concern among Americans who feel they're not doing well is the price of food and services. Gas prices are second at 70%, and housing prices at 57%. 40% of Americans feel bad about their own financial situation. Frivolous spending is out of the question for Chrissy Burford, a part-timer at Fresh Air Barbecue. Burford says she and her husband are doing okay, living on their pensions and his Social Security.
Tonight, protesters taking to the streets over ICE arrests. The backlash to a Tufts University graduate student being arrested by federal agents and sent to a detention center halfway across the country. The legal battle and how the Trump administration is justifying taking her into custody. Drastic cuts throughout the country's health agencies. HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. announcing his plans to eliminate 10,000 full-time workers from their jobs. King Charles briefly hospitalized due to side effects from cancer treatment. What we know about his condition. Wildfires in the Carolinas doubling and tripling in size. Up close with firefighters using controlled burns to try to get the flames under control. The arrest today in the arson attack on Tesla cars in Las Vegas, who authorities believe is responsible. The rare move from the White House pulling a key nominee. Why now? NBC's Molly Hunter on the ground in Greenland ahead of Vice President Vance's visit, hearing firsthand how people there are reacting to President Trump saying the U.S. needs Greenland for security reasons.
I would say, please do not take us.
And on Major League Baseball's opening day, how one man and his lawnmower are inspiring millions.
This is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
Good morning. For campaign updates throughout the afternoon from Parliament House. Today, after months of speculation, Anthony Albanese calls the election for May the 3rd.
This election is a choice between Labor's plan to keep building or Peter Dutton's promise to cut.
While the opposition leader, Peter Dutton, makes his pitch on cost of living pressures, or to continue down the current path of debt means that we can't afford 3 more years of Labor. Police officer Christian White avoids jail over the taser death of great-grandmother Claire Nowland. And King Charles returns from hospital after experiencing temporary side effects from his cancer treatment. Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Joe O'Brien. The federal election has officially been called for May the 3rd, kicking off a 5-week
24.
Good morning, I'm Oliver Farry, and this is Daybreak. Renewed European support for Ukraine at the Paris summit, but divisions remain on what sort of security guarantee to provide Kyiv. European leaders agree that sanctions on Russia should not be lifted until peace has been clearly established in Ukraine. Countries across the world scramble to respond to Donald Trump's 25% tariffs on car imports, which are set to take effect next Thursday, with Europe's beleaguered auto sector particularly apprehensive about the effects the levies are likely to have on business. France's foreign minister visits China for talks on trade and Ukraine as Donald Trump's trade wars force France to reassess its relationship with Beijing. Jean-Noël Barrot's Chinese counterpart Wang Yi calls on the West to value multilateralism over unilateralism, but differences between the two sides remain. European leaders have reaffirmed their support for Ukraine as a special security summit in Paris, but the continent is still divided over what role it'll play in providing security guarantees to Kyiv. French President Emmanuel Macron says a handful of countries back the idea of a so-called reassurance force, and Volodymyr Zelensky also thinks the US needs to do more to stand up to Russian efforts to sow division among Ukraine's Western allies. Andrew Hillier takes a look back at the day's events.
Hello and very good morning to you. This is Sky News at 5 a.m. These are your latest headlines. The King postpones his public engagements after experiencing temporary side effects from his cancer treatment. Also this morning, a stalled economy and job losses, the likely impact of Donald Trump's tariffs on the UK now becoming clear.
Trade wars are no good for anyone. It will end up with higher prices for consumers, pushing up inflation after we've worked so hard to get a grip of inflation.
And Keir Starmer accuses Vladimir.
Need a website fast? ClickSite's AI delivers.
And Starmer accuses Vladimir Putin of playing games as leaders discuss how to enforce a ceasefire deal for Ukraine. Hello and very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us here on Sky News. We begin the programme with a developing story. The King has cancelled his public engagements later today after he experienced side effects from his cancer treatment. In a statement made late last night, Buckingham Palace said, following scheduled and ongoing medical treatment for cancer this morning, the King experienced temporary side effects that required a short period of observation in hospital. His Majesty's afternoon engagements were therefore postponed. His Majesty has now returned to Clarence House, and as a precautionary measure, acting on medical advice, tomorrow's diary programme will also be rescheduled. His Majesty would like to send his apologies to all those who may be inconvenienced or disappointed as a result. Well, our royal correspondent Laura Bundock has the latest.
Now, we've been told that he is back at Clarence House, that he's on good form. He's carrying on with state business, looking at the paperwork and able to make calls from his study. But it is unusual for him to cancel engagements, especially this busy day in Birmingham, which, as we all know, will have been meticulously planned and planned for some time. That said, the palace is very keen to stress that things are going to get back to normal very quickly, that he will be back as normal next week. And as for that upcoming state visit to Italy, which is due, in the not too distant future, it's going to have no effect on that. We all.
Africa News. The news. New data from the Integrated Food Security Phase Classification reveals that ongoing conflict and surging food prices have led the Democratic Republic of the Congo into a dire food crisis. An alarming 28 million individuals are now suffering from acute hunger, a rise of 2.5 million since the recent outbreak of violence in December.
2.5 million people have been pushed into acute food insecurity, and the needs are growing. The humanitarian situation in DRC is deteriorating at an alarming rate. Families who were already struggling to feed themselves are now facing an even harsher reality. We have been able to resume operations in North and South Kivu, but we urgently need more resources and more funding.
Recent operations until August 2025.
The Sudan Sovereign Council on Wednesday declared Khartoum free after expelling the Rapid Support Forces RSF from the capital. The Sudanese army has in recent weeks extended its military operation success, recapturing the presidential palace, and the most recent one retaking the airport in Khartoum from the RSF. According to multiple reports from Khartoum residents, the RSF fighters were replaced by the army across the city center on Wednesday, marking a major milestone for the National Army in the fight that has split the country since it began 2 years ago. The war broke out when the military and the RSF turned against each other in the struggle for power. Their battles around Khartoum left the RSF in control of the airport, presidential palace, and other neighborhoods as the fighting spread around the country. Seizing the capital doesn't end the conflict, as the RSF still controls parts of the western Darfur region and other areas. Earlier in the day, the military announced it had recaptured the RSF's last major stronghold in Khartoum, the Taiba al-Hasnab camp. There was no immediate RSF comment.
Brazil's President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, who's currently on a visit to Japan, has taken a swipe at US President Donald Trump's decision to slap a 25% tariff on imported vehicles. From what I know, the United States imports a lot of Japanese cars and also has a lot of Japanese companies' production sites. I honestly don't know what the benefit is of increasing tariffs on cars purchased from Japan by 25%.
A recent report from the World Bank entitled Accelerating Access to Clean Air on a Livable Planet suggests that with focused policy measures, the number of individuals facing hazardous levels of air pollution could be reduced by 50% by the year 2040.
Too many people are breathing dirty air, especially in low and middle income countries. And we estimate the economic costs of outdoor air pollution to be about 5% of global GDP.
This is Asia Now.
Hello and good afternoon. It is 12 p.m. in Singapore and Hong Kong, 9:30 a.m. in New Delhi, 11 o'clock in Jakarta. I'm Yasmin Yonkers at this hour. South Korea battles raging wildfires, which have claimed 28 lives and scorched nearly 50,000 hectares of woodland. That's more than half of Seoul. And officials say the country's worst ever natural fire disaster exposes the harsh reality of global heating. A 5-week election campaign in Australia begins as Prime Minister Anthony Albanese seeks a second term. And he will face rival Peter Dutton, who's also leader of the opposition. Key issues include cost of living and housing shortages. Also, U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth reaffirms America's ironclad commitment to the Mutual Defense Treaty with the Philippines and tells President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. in Manila that both countries must stand shoulder to shoulder in the face of what he calls threats posed by China. South Korean firefighters are battling to contain several wildfires ravaging the country's southeast as tens of thousands flee to safety. At least 28 people have died since the blazes began last Friday. 32 others have been injured and some critically. Well, officials have reported progress, though, in fighting these fires, with a major blaze in Uiseong 95% contained, while 85% of flames in neighboring Andong City have been doused. The weather's also helping because there's light rain falling overnight in some areas. Around 38,000 people have been forced to evacuate. The majority of the displaced are in Uiseong and Andong areas. Some of them fled the rapidly advancing flames with just the clothes on their backs.
생각도 안 하다가 또 가라앉았다고 제가 나오면서요 운동화도 없이 이 쓰리빠 신고 나와가지고요 지금 갈 데가 없어가지고 지금은요.
Good morning. The King returns to hospital.
King Charles is recovering at Clarence House after briefly returning to hospital after suffering an adverse reaction to his cancer treatment.
He's now been discharged, but his engagements today have been cancelled.
A source close to the King says it was a precautionary measure and described the episode as a most minor bump in the road.
The Prime Minister has co-hosted another Coalition of the Willing summit in Paris, with plans for a reassurance force in Ukraine announced amongst the allies.
And we agreed here in Paris today that it's clear the Russians are filibustering. They are playing games and they're playing for time. It is a classic from the Putin playbook.
The government opens a new £100 million prison to tackle overcrowding, the size of 39 football pitches and a capacity of 1,500 spaces. We're asking this morning, is it enough to reduce crime levels?
Britain's pothole crisis continues, the PM giving councils an ultimatum: fix them or lose funding. JCB, though, are slamming what you call the patch and run approach.
6 people have tragically died after a tourist submarine sinks in the Red Sea off the coast of Egypt.
Just Stop Oil have announced the end of their campaign of civil resistance after 3 years of chaos and disruption, as Ed Miliband has made their main demands a government policy.
The first ever edible soap has been created to highlight hygiene poverty in the UK, where a number of people are forced to choose between food and toiletries. We'll be trying some of this edible soap later on.
Are we eating it?
We are.
Are we going to do that?
In the sport this morning, Chelsea do to Manchester City exactly what Arsenal did to Real Madrid by coming back from 2-0 down to win 3-0 at home and head into the semi-finals of the Women's Champions League. Max Verstappen likes an Instagram post saying Red Bull bullied SAC driver Liam Lawson, and there are 2 Kylian Mbappes. So could Spurs have one of those, please?
Hello, good morning. Quite a wet start across the southeast, but brightening up later. Plenty of showers in the north, though, and maybe even a risk of snow. Stay tuned and I'll have all the details.
Just gone 6 o'clock. I'm Stephen Dixon.
I'm Ellie Costello, and this is GB News Breakfast.
Good evening, I'm Amna Navaz.
And I'm Jeff Bennett. On the News Hour tonight, the fallout from new tariffs the Trump administration is imposing on cars and auto parts.
The Secretary of Homeland Security tours an El Salvador prison housing alleged gang members from the U.S. We speak to one of the top lawyers challenging the deportations.
And in rural Nebraska, how trade wars and federal funding cuts are complicating daily life for some of the people who voted to put President Trump back in office.
I did not expect there to be such a massive, quick, rash cut to the federal government. I really expected it to be logical.
Welcome to the News Hour. Foreign leaders in Europe, Canada, and Asia tonight sharply criticized President Trump's announcement of 25% tariffs on imported cars and car parts, with some suggesting they may strike back with new tariffs of their own.
Nearly half of all passenger vehicles sold in the U.S. last year were assembled outside the country. Experts said the tariffs could upend the global automotive industry and raise prices for consumers. The administration said the move, scheduled to take effect next week, would spur domestic manufacturing and lead to over $100 billion in new annual revenue. French President Emmanuel Macron called it both a betrayal and bad economic policy.
Mettre des tarifs, c'est casser des chaînes de valeur.
Imposing tariffs means breaking value chains. It means creating in the short term an inflationary effect and destroying jobs. So it is not good for the American or the European economy. In the same way, it is not good for the Canadian or Mexican economy. I find there to be a sort of paradox in seeing the main allies of the United States to be the first ones taxed.
For more now, we're joined by Gavin Bade. He's trade and economic policy reporter for the Wall Street Journal. Gavin, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Pleasure is mine. Thank you.
So these tariffs were a campaign promise for President Trump. Last month, he seemed to give automakers a bit of a reprieve. Now that they've been officially announced, and as he says, now that they're permanent, what kind of reaction are you hearing from people in the industry?
Today, I think, was a lot of surprise, confusion, and trepidation. You know, very few people, even those very close to the White House, expected that these tariffs would be unveiled yesterday. We thought that.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Here's what's happening right now. Auto tariffs force the Prime Minister back to the Hill.
Nothing is off the table.
Canada's response in the pivotal upcoming call with Donald Trump. We have never seen an attack like this. Navigating the devastating impact of tariffs.
Bring your daughter home.
A family's desperate plea. Plus, the field day home opener with a swing at America.
Thank you very much for giving time to Amir Shekel 5858. I am Amir Shekel. Have a good life. Bye-bye.